Thank you for downloading this Brum Radio podcast. For more podcasts, visit brumradio.com.
And now, for your listening pleasure, it's the Brum Picture Show, brought to you by Brum Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Brum Picture Show, the weekly film show brought to you by Birmingham-based community cinema collective Screen B14. My name is Paul Vernon and I'm delighted to say we've got a full studio again today. Listeners last week will remember that in Nadine's absence the show devolved into chaos as Rory went mad with power and was permitted to debut his conceptually flawed and ultimately meaningless Rob Reiner test. Wherein Rory took it upon himself to be the grand adjudicator of artistic quality to the delight of no one. And we... Sorry, Rory, I love you. We were so inundated with complaints that our beloved and multi-talented co-presenter Nadine O'Mahony, director of not only films, but our hearts and minds, felt compelled to put aside the more important things in her life, like, you know, her career, to return to her position as the voice of reason on this show. So welcome back, Nadine. How are you?
I'm good. I've been hobnobbing with celebrities.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It means that
Eating some hobnobs.
I blagged my way into the This Town VIP drinks at the town hall and met my hero, Stephen Knight.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's exciting.
I got a photo with him.
Nice.
And so that's a lifetime achievement unlocked there.
Oh, wicked. Exciting stuff. Well, welcome back, Nadine. Thank you very much for joining us again. And don't worry, Rory fans, he's still here. In fact, he's come all the way from that Dover he has just to be on this show. So that's very kind. So thanks, Rory. How's it going? How's Dover?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Sounded so enthusiastic.
You sound so full of beans, Rory.
No, I was hanging out on the streets, the Dover streets, and lots of talk of the Rob Reiner test there, mostly from me. But, word's spreading around. Soon it'll spread to France, past the Channel Tunnel, and who knows where else it will go.
Rob Reiner's going viral. Well, yes, I'm sorry for questioning the entire validity of that test. Well, it's lovely to have the Brum Picture Show family back together.
The dream team.
The dream team. So we've got a very exciting show lined up for you today. As today's episode, we're calling the Book Club episode. That's right. We're going to be devoting the entire episode to talking about the 2018 romantic comedy Book Club with Diane Keaton and Jane Fonda about a group of women in a book club who discover a new zest for life after reading 50 Shades of Grey. And of course, we'll be discussing its 2023 sequel, Book Club, The Next Chapter. So here we go. Book Club was released on May the 18th, 2018 by Paramount Pictures. Principal photography began in August 2017 around Santa Clarita, California, with Bill Haldeman directing from a screenplay by himself and Erin Sims.
Paul, I don't think we got the memo on this.
I don't think Haldeman passes the Rob Reiner test.
This is not what I prepared.
Is it not?
No, I thought we were doing book adaptations to tie in with our screening of Poor Things on the 18th of April.
Oh, well, that sounds like a much better idea. Should we do that instead?
Yeah, I think that is a better idea.
Okay, that's good because I've never actually seen either of those Book Club films.
Have you read them, though?
Book Club is based on a book.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Whoa. Can we do that now? Now we've got an expert.
Oh, well, let's just stick to the original plan then. Talk for an hour, Rory.
Chapter 1.
No, we were just doing a silly joke there. We are indeed to tie in with Screen B14's upcoming screening of Poor Things at the Cuban Embassy in Moseley. We're going to be talking about literary adaptations. So I suppose we've gone from one of the most niche subjects possible to one of the broadest. But now it is time for the news section. So we need to be careful with the news section today, as we're recording this on April Fool's Day, and we've already been briefly fooled into thinking that rubbish Glaswegian Willy Wonka experience that has been a talking point on this show for the past couple of episodes was coming to Birmingham. Now, thankfully, we believe we are being spared this horror.
Well, I'm
but
very disappointed. I wanted to meet the unknown.
You wanted to meet the
They
unknown.
said there were
I know.
chocolate tasting, and it said no AI generated scripts. I was like ready to bunk off the show a second week in a row.
I've booked my tickets. Is it? It's not.
I don't think it's real, Rory, no.
Who did I buy those tickets?
Was it a man selling magic beans?
Oh, no, not that guy.
Hey, I'm sorry to break that for you. So anyway, has anyone seen anything interesting in the news that's actual fact, that's actually happened?
I met a celebrity.
That's very personal news.
Yeah, I met, and I've got them to record a message for the show.
Wow, okay. So this is a
message recorded especially for the show.
Hi, my name's Mia Goff. Some people say that I sound like a Victorian street urchin, but I'm an adult woman, and I've been listening to the Brum Picture Show for some time now, and Nadine's a good friend of mine, and she told me that Paul was a big fan, but
That's nice.
I've heard him talk about Florence Pugh quite a lot more than me. So I would like to tell Paul to get lost, basically.
Oh, that's not very
I
nice.
won't be coming on the show now.
Ah, Paul.
Okay, bye.
Paul, mate, you ruined that one.
Oh, what have you done?
ruined my chances with
That
Mia
would
Goff.
have been our biggest guest.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, I've got to say, I was not expecting that. An actual voicemail from the actual Mia Goff telling me telling me to get lost.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Mia, just because I've mentioned Florence Pugh a few times
Quite
doesn't mean
a few times.
Mia's quite insecure, I
once or
think.
twice.
think.
Yeah. Mia,
I think Mia, she needs to be number one, or she's not on the list. Mia's a boss.
Oh my goodness. Well, okay. Well, I'm sorry, Mia, and that's. I don't know what to say.
100% real.
100% real.
Yeah,
Yeah.
stop sucking on those helium balloons, Mia. They're not good for you.
Well, I wonder if we'll get a voicemail from Florence Pugh next week in
I'm
retaliation.
not sure I know Florence Pugh well enough, but if anybody out there does,
Yeah.
do let her know. There's a place for her on the show if she wants to take it.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. Well, good stuff. So, any other real news? The things that have happened.
Any
in,
news
in,
equally real?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a voicemail from David Lynch, actually. Let me just play it now. And
Hello.
it was a very short voicemail.
I think it was the wrong number.
I think he lost signal sort of halfway through, but that's fine.
Funnily enough, I will be mentioning David Lynch in a bit. So, okay, well, there we go.
I have a real news.
You have a real news. That's good. What
And
is
not
it?
that the other news wasn't real, but this is also real.
Okay.
Kristen Stewart said that joining the MCU sounds like an effing nightmare.
Oh, yes.
So
yeah.
I guess we won't be seeing her pop up in Blade.
Unless
anytime
it's directed by Greta Gerwig, she said, apparently.
soon. Okay.
So if they get Greta to come in
Yeah,
and make a
well-
Marvel film, she'll be on board, which surely isn't out of the realms of possibility.
No. I think that'd be a very interesting Greta Gerwig, Kristen Stewart, Marvel team. What do you think they might do together? X-Men, maybe? She could be one of the X-Men characters.
Yeah. Or little ex-women.
Jubilee or something.
I
watch
would
it.
see that, to be
Yeah.
fair. Yeah.
Timothy Chalamet as... Trying to think of any of the other X-Men characters right now.
You have predicted that Timothée Chalamet will bulk up one day and become an action hero.
Yeah.
So
well, this is his
who knows?
opportunity.
Well, there we go.
Zendaya as Storm.
Yeah.
And Timothy Chalamet as Cyclops, maybe.
There we go. Basically casts
Just
itself,
cast-
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually do kind of want to see that.
Yeah, of
I've
course.
talked myself into it.
Yeah, of course. Well,
It's quite cool.
count down the days till that happens.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, there we go.
Exciting.
Interesting news. Some other news then. Good news for David Robert Mitchell fans. They're going to let him make a film again. That's nice. So you remember David Robert Mitchell is the director of It Follows, and he was put into movie jail after he made the self-indulgent Hot Mess and one of my favourite films, Under the Silver Lake. And yeah, he's going to be back with a new film, a sci-fi film filmed in IMAX starring Ewan McGregor and Anne Hathaway, with J.J. Abrams, amongst others, producing. And it's now started filming and has been given a title, Flowervale Street. And apparently it's going to be a thrill ride and will contain some dinosaurs.
Ooh.
Yeah. So that's exciting.
Interesting.
Yeah. Right.
Francis Ford Coppola screened a cut of his film Megalalopolis.
It exists.
Too much praise. Apparently, it's like nothing out there.
Ooh.
Both forward-looking and backward-looking at the same time.
Is that just sort of static then?
Yeah. It's just a painting.
Yeah, it could be,
Yeah.
quite frankly.
Well, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised.
People would still go to see it.
I'd go to
Definitely.
see it.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I'm quite excited that it might be a hot mess. I don't mind.
Yeah,
But 120 million of his own
yeah.
readies put
It's
up.
mad. All from making his wine, I think, isn't
Yeah,
it? His riches.
Adam Driver starring in it. Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see if other people outside of this carefully selected 300 enjoy it. But it would be really exciting because, his whole thing, his whole career, it was about changing the system, changing the studio system. That's why he put up his own money for Apocalypse Now and, teamed up with George Lucas to make American Zoetrope, which unfortunately failed after One from the Heart, sank. But maybe he's done it. Maybe he's finally done it. Maybe he's changed the way
Yeah.
movies are made.
Exactly.
I don't know. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. One final thing that I can't not mention. It has been brought to my attention by listener Skip and reported in Los Angeles magazine, the most exciting news that I've heard for a while. A gigantic rotating head of David Lynch has appeared in Santa Monica. That's right.
What?
That's right. The Twin Peaks director has been immortalized in a 5-ton sculpture by Czech artist David Czerny, and it is 5 tons of shiny metal head, and it was recently unveiled in Santa Monica and stands at over 21 foot high.
And it rotates.
It rotates, yes. So it is an animated structure and towers above the sidewalk in front of a new apartment complex at the corner of Lincoln Boulevard and Colorado Avenue. Now, that's a complex I'd like to live in. Imagine how reassuring coming home to a giant effigy of David Lynch would be every day. That's great.
Does he do the weather report every day as well?
I hope so. Yeah.
Have you bought your plane tickets then?
Yes, of course.
Did he send you this news today?
No, I checked. This came out. No, it's real. There's pictures.
It's real.
There's pictures and everything. And
Sure, they're not AI generated.
No, I refuse to accept that possibility. This is a real thing that has happened. There is a rotating silver sculpture of David Lynch in Santa Monica, and apparently it cost $1 million.
Because there isn't anything better to spend that on, is there?
Well, no. Apparently, it's not taxpayers' money as such. So there's a thing in Santa Monica that states that property developers must donate 2% of their budget to public artworks.
And this is what
and that's what they've
was
come up
donated.
with. So
Lovely.
So there you go. And apparently the spinning, according to the artist, is 60% of the actual piece. And a City report says that the layers will shift and realign in a dynamic and mesmerizing way. At certain points in its revolution, it will be figurative. At others, it will be abstract and undiscernible as a human form. So that sounds perfect for David Lynch.
What does he mean by 60% of the actual piece?
Well, I think
what percentage of what?
Yeah, of your enjoyment or significance of it. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. It's like 60% of it, 40% of it is you going, that's David Lynch's head. And then the other 60%
Right,
is
okay.
you going, it's spinning.
Moves.
Yeah, so
I love to think that out of the million, 10,000 was on the sculpture
Yeah.
and the rest was on it spinning.
yeah, it's like it must spin. This is
Obviously, it's something you've got to witness in person. I think what they're trying
Mm-hmm.
to say is like a photo doesn't do it justice because it's not spinning.
yeah.
But a GIF.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe,
A GIF
yeah.
of David Lynch's metallic rotating head. So that's some happy news, isn't it? So
Yeah.
I thought couldn't not mention that, really. Rory, you have some interesting news?
Yes, I want to talk about a show that I wrote. It's called Sea View. It was part of the Coventry UK City of Culture that occurred in 2021. And it was funded by the Belgrade Theatre, and now that show's on Amazon Prime.
Oh,
Yeah. So it's a 3-part episodic series. I wrote episode 2. But yeah, watch it all.
Oh.
I can't just promote my one; that would be wrong.
No.
But it was part of a team of writers who all came together and wrote the show. And there was a head writer as well, Sophie Ellaby, Corey Campbell. Yeah, they did a brilliant job. So yeah, please tune into that Sea View on Amazon Prime.
Oh, there we
Exciting.
go. Yeah, I mean, I'd call that more of a shameless plug than news, but I'm very excited to hear that.
It was
Well,
news for me.
News for the Rory fans.
And then we do have
Fan.
many. We have many Rory fans.
And I'm glad you allowed me to do it because obviously it is television.
Oh, it's
Did I?
Can you just ignore everything that you just said?
Well,
Just,
Twin
we do
Peaks
not.
is television.
Oh yeah, and that's the greatest thing ever made. All right then, I'll allow it. I'll allow it through onto the
It's
Brum
better
Picture
than
Show.
Twin Peaks.
Ooh, you got to tune in just to prove that.
Them's fighting words, sir. Them's
Yeah.
fighting words. Well, there you go, Rory fans, and even just fans of art in general. Watch that thing that you just said the name of.
Sea View.
Sea View. Watch Sea View.
On Amazon Prime.
Good stuff. You are listening to the Brum Picture Show on Brum Radio, and it's time to discuss our literary adaptation recommendations. So, yeah, I guess this is kind of a very broad subject. There's been a lot of films made out of books, and you might think it's a recent thing that pop culture has started to eat itself with remakes of comic book adaptations, films based on computer games. But let's just not forget that they weren't that original in the olden times either, and people have been getting their ideas from books for ages.
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, exactly.
Nosferatu.
Well, yes, because I was going to say about that. Interestingly, that was one of the first kind of copyright hoo-has back in 1922. So yeah, Nosferatu, the 1922 German expressionist classic, got into hot water as whilst its credits stated that it was based on Bram Stoker's Dracula, they neglected to actually ask anyone for permission or pay anyone for that. So this caused a bit of a dispute, and Stoker's widow Florence wasn't too happy about that, and then at great financial risk sued the production company in Berlin and won the case. And in the settlement for that case, all of the copies of Nosferatu were ordered to be destroyed. But thankfully, it had been so widely distributed across the world by that point that the film survived. And then the filmmakers themselves found themselves ironically faced with their own legal battles of trying to stop these bootlegs. So it's not a new thing, people making books out of films, but
Or films out of books.
people making films out of books. In recent years, maybe it's been more comic book
Yeah.
world.
But
And-
I would say comic books lend themselves better to adaptations.
Because they've already got pictures there, haven't they?
Yeah, it's basically storyboards done for you.
Yeah.
And I think novellas are really good. So if we go back to the Rob Reiner test, Stand By
Please.
Me is a short story, I believe, by Stephen King.
It is.
Because I think when you have a big meaty novel, you just have to cut so much out of it to get it into a 2-hour or less film that sometimes people have to say, oh, the book's better. So I do find often that the mini-series based on books are more enjoyable for me because they can include more characters and subplots that might have got excised out of a feature adaptation. So, it is a challenge. So a short book or a novella or a short story, I think, works very well. But sometimes the big rambly novels work better in other mediums, I think.
Films are still better than TV, though. Fact.
Okay.
But it is an endless source of inspiration. If you listen to our Roger Shannon interview, which is available wherever you get your podcasts now, he talks a lot about, that's his advice to young filmmakers like making films about their cities, is to just choose novels from writers from that city. So, and there's never going to not be books being written. So apparently 2.2 million books are published every year. And there are supposedly 158,464,880 unique books in the world as of 2023, almost half of which were written by Stephen King. So, yeah, there you go.
The other half were AI generated.
Exactly. And yeah, according to Frontier Economics, 70% of the world's top grossing films are based on books. And the percentage of books adapted to film varies year to year. So in 2005, 66% of films were adapted from books. And then in 2011, only 28% were adapted from books. So I don't know whether, was that just as the superhero thing was kicking off? I don't know. But then it got back up to 65% in 2015. So it is ridiculous when you think about it, just how many things are based on books. Like even things that you don't really immediately think, yeah, that's a book. Like Die Hard, that's a book. A lot of people don't know that. So that was based on...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, based on 1979's Nothing Lasts Forever. But it's not one of those ones that people go, well, the book was better. That's a common argument, isn't it, with the big books? People who be like, oh, film's rubbish. But there's a lot of films out there you don't even realise there are books. So there you go. So yeah, we toyed with the idea of narrowing down the subject matter from the millions and millions and millions of films that are based on books. But no, we just thought we'd just throw it wide open and just see what we came up with as a literary adaptation that we would like to talk about. So I believe Nadine is going to go first.
Why do I always have to go first?
Well, because that's the way the show is structured.
Well, I am the authority on this, being as I'm a former librarian with over 10 years' experience in academic libraries, don't you know?
Oh, yes.
And a filmmaker. And, you would have thought I'd read more books. But no. Well, the thing is, I have read a lot of books and I've watched a lot of films, but I haven't watched that many films that I've also read the book of, I realise. And like I said, I like a lot of the classic literature, Dickens, Austen, Brontes, but I prefer the TV adaptations of those books. The TV adaptation of North and South I highly recommend, and is one of the few occasions which I'd say improves on the book in several ways. There's some scenes invented for the show that I think work better than they do in the book. Tenant of Wildfowl Hall, the BBC adaptation of that from the 90s. There's Jane Eyre, the BBC adaptation with Ruth Wilson in. Love that. But films, not so much. I tend to be quite disappointed. So we talked about some disappointing adaptations, and I have to say, if I was going to choose one, Roman Polanski's Oliver Twist would be on that list. It's just too sugary. It's just too chocolate boxy. Doesn't have those gothic Dickensian vibes that we like to see, or I like to see. It wasn't doing it for me. But yeah, so you're thinking, okay, Nadine, you're a librarian. You obviously have a love of classic literature. What are we talking? Pride and Prejudice here? Are we talking War and Peace, Anna Karenina? We're talking He's Just Not That Into You. That's my choice today.
Oh.
Yeah, I thought I'd go a bit rogue. I thought I'd do something a bit different because He's Just Not That Into You, if you don't remember, is a self-help book from the 2000s written by the writers of Sex and the City to help women who are hopeless romantics. And the film that came out in 2009 is based on the non-fiction self-help book, but is a fictionalised version of it, which I just think is a really interesting concept to make a narrative feature based on a self-help book. I just thought that was a weird concept. So it's kind of a loose adaptation, I guess you would say.
Interesting.
But yeah, I read the book. I have the book. I have the glamour edition of the book, which is a free copy I got with Glamour magazine.
Could you lend me that?
Yeah, I think it's something you guys might get something out of.
Okay.
I got a lot out of it, certainly, the one time that I read it. I think it's something everybody should read. I'm just going to rattle through some of the chapter titles here. He's just not into you if he's not asking you out. He's just not that into you if he's not calling you. He's just not that into you if he's not dating you. That one came as a massive surprise to me, I have to say. He's just not that into you if he's not having sex with you. He's just not that into you if he's having sex with someone else. Yeah. Again, quite a surprise. He's just not that into you if he only wants to have sex with you when he's drunk. He's just not that into you if he doesn't want to marry you. He's just not that into you if he's breaking up with you. Again, quite a shock. He's just not that into you if he's disappeared on you. He's just not that into you if he's married and other variations of being unavailable. He's one of my favourites. He's just not that into you if he's a selfish jerk, a bully, or a really big freak. Wow. And then we've got some other chapters such as don't listen to these stories. So these are the ones where people are like, yeah, well, my partner was married or a really big jerk.
Right, okay.
But then after years of, dating, they finally changed and now we're happy and,
What's the defence there then? They don't exist.
They're the exception.
Oh, they're the exception.
They're the exception to the rule. You shouldn't be basing your dating life off freak anomalies.
And freaks.
Yeah, and there's various other sort of chapters. There's a Q&A with the writers, some closing remarks. Interestingly, I remember when I read the book, it's called He's Just Not That Into You, which is very gendered. And there was a question of, why not she's just not that into you? And they said, men don't need to hear this.
Oh. I mean, from a lot of those chapter headings, I don't think a lot of women need to hear that either. It's kind of blatantly obvious.
I feel like they need to be more subtle. Like, he's just not that into you if he's too busy watching documentaries about the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Or that would be all men, surely, if TikTok experiments would have us believe. But no, they reckon that men just don't have as much issues as women with making excuses for crappy partners. And I do think having female friends who I kind of shoved this book on when I got it, I do think, I know it sounds obvious, but I do think some of these things are things that people need to hear. And I know plenty of women who are not getting phone calls off men who are making excuses for why, maybe their phone's broken. Maybe they've, lost the ability to speak. And it's nice because it's not saying there's something wrong with you or, there's something wrong with that person. They're just not that into you. So don't put as much energy into this, deluding yourself that they're in love with you when they're obviously not very interested. And I think, again, might sound obvious, but I think it's a thing that some people need to hear. But, it goes into more detail. Those are just the chapter headings, which are obviously eye-catching and meant to be provocative. But I do think there's some good advice in there. The film takes quite a different tact. It's one of those kind of Love Actually style. Yeah, I don't like Love Actually. I actually enjoy this film, I have to say. Okay. It's not even like a guilty pleasure. Like, I did enjoy this film. But it's like a Love Actually sort of ensemble cast. I mean, it's stacked. We've got Ben Affleck, Jennifer Aniston, Drew Barrymore, Justin Long, Jennifer Connelly, Scarlett Johansson, Bradley Cooper.
Oh, wow.
Jennifer Goodwin. But yeah, really stacked cast.
Yeah.
All with their own little storylines. They all sort of know each other. Sort of the girls all work together in an office, but they all have their own romantic misadventures. So Jennifer Goodwin, without giving too much away, plays this hopeless romantic, and she gets advice. Justin Long is the guy who tells us he's just not that into you. Like, he's the one that imparts the knowledge. And then she goes forth to her female friends and says, you know, all those terrible guys that you're dating and married to, they're not into you. But there's a lovely scene as well where he's giving her advice because some guy she's dating is going to be out of town, out of touch for like some indefinite period of time. And he's like, oh, where's he going? And she's like, Pittsburgh. And he's like, run away. And she's like, what? She goes, but if I run away from all the men that aren't interested in me, there'll be nobody left. Which is very sad. But there's some wonderful moments. There's a moment that I find probably one of the most romantic moments in film, where Jennifer Aniston is with Ben Affleck. They split up, but he comes around and does the washing up for her when her dad has a heart attack. I just found that to be one of the most romantic things I've ever seen on screen. It's like, we're not even dating, but I'm coming here.
Was this before dishwashers?
This was after dishwashers, so it's even more romantic.
It sounds like, and forgive me if I'm wrong, it sounds like then they've taken the name He's Just Not That Into You, and then they've made a film.
Well, it's a little bit more than that, because as I say, each of these characters are involved in a relationship that could be reflective of some of those chapters of, like, you know, he's married, he's not calling you, he's going to Pittsburgh and says he'll be out of contact for an indefinite period.
Those are the excuses on which chapter.
And like I said, Justin Long is kind of the guru who imparts this amazing knowledge that you shouldn't be chasing after people who don't care about you. But yeah, I think it's, you know, it's fluffy. It's not exactly hard-hitting drama. It's very glossy and, you know, has a bit of, you know, 2009 corniness about it, but I find it quite enjoyable. And I think, you know, if you're not a big rom-com fan, this isn't going to convert you. But you know, if you are into that kind of thing, I think this is a bit of fun and a bit silly. So yeah, that was my literature and film choice.
That's a beautiful choice, Nadine. Very subversive. Well, I look forward to checking out the book and the film. It sounds...
Yeah, I will give you my glamour edition copy. I think it's something everyone needs to read, genuinely.
Excellent. So that was Nadine's book pick, because we're having a Brum Picture Show book club today where we're going through our favourite literary adaptations to...
I didn't know it was our favourite.
Just some literary adaptations, films that are of books that we have read. Which
it's your favourite book. It's your favourite piece of literature adapted into a film.
Yeah,
Yes.
and
thanks for that, Nathan.
That's what you've put on record.
The glamour edition.
Of He's Just Not That Into You.
Former librarian.
Yes.
There you go.
Former being the operative word.
So, Rory, have you read any books?
I've seen a few picture books here and there. I like reading books. I wouldn't say I'm an avid reader, but I try and have a book on the go. But I agree with you. I think sort of the best pieces of literature never really turn out to be the best films. I just think the scope of a piece of literature can go far and beyond a film, really. Then there's no sort of, I guess, boundaries or set limits. You can really get into the world of a character, and the barrier between audience of a novel and the audience of a film is that, well, in a novel, you are the one who's imagining the film. You are the one who's imagining that scene. You know, someone isn't doing it for you. So I think you can develop a really great connection there.
You're the director.
Exactly. I don't know. And some of my favourite novels actually haven't been. I don't think, like Crime and Punishment is one of my favourite novels, and I don't think that's been adapted into a film. I'm not sure.
Not one that we know.
Yeah. But I just think the scope of novels, you know, can go far and beyond. But some of my, like Cormac McCarthy is one of my favourite writers, and I've read sort of, you know, Blood Meridian, which is a great novel, which hasn't been adapted into a film, but then No Country for Old Men has been, and really successfully, as well as The Road, which I don't think was the film didn't quite match the novel, but it was a really interesting film. It had a really great atmosphere, which, you know, sometimes it's focusing on atmosphere as well, but The Road was again a novella. So I think you are right in that sometimes novellas can make really great films. As they go longer, I think people struggle with them. But no, the film I chose to talk about, well, the novel, the film I chose was Carrie by Stephen King.
Nice.
Interesting.
And yeah, I've read a few books of Stephen King, and one of the books I've read is On Writing, which is, I don't know if you've ever read that as a writer yourself.
Are you saying that could be adapted into a film? I'd like to see that.
Yeah, but it's a sort of an amazing sort of insight into Stephen King's work. And he says he himself isn't a great writer. He's just a really well-seasoned writer, a good writer, well-practiced. And I think that too. I think a lot of the novels he's written, they're not sort of these high-end pieces of literature. You know, they lean almost closer to pulp fiction, I think. But they do make amazing films. And I think that's because in some ways his books just lend really well to films, and Carrie is a really great example of that. But it's such a thin novel. It's like I think it's 79. Yeah, it's under 100 pages, I think.
Well, sounds like my kind of book.
Yeah. But yeah, I think Carrie was, I believe, his first published novel, but his fourth he actually wrote, and he wasn't, you know, the biggest fan of it when he finished it. I think he even threw it in the bin, but his wife managed to get it out of the bin, and that became his first sort of success. It's very Kingian, you know, all the sort of his classic horror tropes are in there, and it's about a young sort of teenager who's sort of, you know, going through high school, I think, and sort of blossoming into a young woman who is living under the ruling of an Orthodox Christian mum, a fundamentalist, who really takes out her previous sort of abuse and sort of sexual sort of frustration on her, and you know and it really is just a sort of it's a horror film from the start. It's a psychological, it's a horror novel and a horror film. It's psychological, and then as she develops telekinetic powers throughout the film, and at a culminating scene, which is her prom date, where she's humiliated in front of her entire school, she wreaks havoc and goes on Rwenge. I've seen both films, actually. I've seen the Brian De Palma film in the 70s, I believe, and I've seen the 2013 Carrie, which was also... Have you seen it?
I've not seen it, but I've heard bad reviews, but I would like to see it.
I actually quite liked it, and I think you might quite like it too.
Do you think which do you think is closer to the book?
De Palma's closer to the novel, but you might like it because the newer adaptation is from a female director, and they've made those decisions to sort of represent, I guess, it's more feminine.
Less gratuitous shower scenes.
Much less gratuitous shower scenes, and also that scene in particular in the Brian De Palma, it's the girls in that shower scene, they almost act like men in terms of their bullying, their sort of ruckus, you know, and they act like, you know, as men. But in the 2013 version, it's sort of more sort of underhand embarrassment and shame. So yeah, I think you would actually enjoy it. And then the mum in the 2013 version it's much less about, I guess, this sort of, you know, frothy mouthed evil Christian fundamentalist sort of, you know, tyrannical person. She's more, I think it's Julianne Moore, and she's a woman. She's a woman who's sort of experiencing real sort of mental ill health. You know, and I think she self-harms, and she has sort of OCD, and it's really like, well, she can't even love herself, so how can she love her child? Which is, I think, again, a really interesting decision. I think the only thing with the later version is sort of, it goes way too Hollywood for me. It sort of becomes, you know, she develops superpower type thing, and that felt tonally wrong. But yeah, I think it's both films are great. I mean, I prefer the Brian De Palma version because I think it's in more the spirit of Stephen King's novella, but I would recommend both and seeing what you think of the later version, because it's often, like you said, heavily criticised, but I think there's some merits to the film as well.
Wow, now that I hear Julianne Moore's in it, I'm kind of on board for that.
Yeah, it's Chloe Grace Moretz as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the
She's
lead
great.
role. Yeah. Want to watch both of them now. It's been
Yeah.
ages since I've seen the original Carrie.
It's interesting though, because what you're saying about it being a horror film, I would say it's more a high school drama that descends into horror. Like it's not like, say, for example, Scream that just hits the ground running with like mayhem.
Yeah.
So it does really, it's very character based. So it's not just like a
It's almost
slasher.
coming of age as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a
Yeah.
coming of age film. So if you're going in just wanting like a kind of silly slasher movie, it's not that movie. But yeah, it does take its time to really build that tension and atmosphere. But yeah, definitely worth watching. And I'd like to catch the remake and compare and read the book as well.
Well, thanks, Rory. That's excellent choice. So yeah, all of you listeners out there, if you haven't read that book or seen the films, then do so on Rory's recommendation, because as you remember, he is the grand adjudicator of objective quality.
Yeah, and like I said, if you've got any sort of films you're not sure about, just email them through and I can take a look and give my own review. Yeah,
you've got the time for that, haven't you?
I've got time for that.
Picture show at brumradio.com.
There we go. Oh, good stuff. Well, I suppose it's time for my pick, isn't it? So I must admit, I'm not really much one for novels either. I'm more of a...
This is turning into our Wes Anderson
Yeah.
episode. Does anybody read?
I like
We've
it.
read a book here.
We don't read. Well, yeah, I'm more of a... I was discussing this with you the other day, Nadine. I'm more of a book collector than a book reader.
Same.
I've got all these books that I have every intention of reading one day, and they just sit there on the shelf.
Oh, the
looking
shelves
nice
and shelves of dusty books
Yeah.
that I have that have never been touched.
taking up space. But I fully intend to read every book on that shelf one day before I
if you
perish.
didn't do it through the pandemic,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe. Don't know. I just feel like it's for when I'm in a log cabin in the middle of nowhere in the woods. That's when I'll be reading those books. Because in the pandemic, I was living in a house with other people.
And Wi-Fi.
Yeah. So exactly.
Yeah.
So, but if I don't have any access to any kind of humans or the internet, then
well, I
I'd
lost
probably get some reading
Wi-Fi
done.
during the pandemic, and I still didn't crack out a book.
Oh, wow. you just stared into
DVDs,
space.
man.
Oh yeah,
Physical media.
Yeah, no, exactly. So yeah, I'm more of a book collector than a book reader. So I guess it wasn't really too hard to whittle down what I was going to talk about. Because haven't actually read that many novels. So I'm going to talk about one of my favourite adaptations of one of my favourite authors, Hunter S. Thompson, who was the forefather of gonzo journalism, a style of journalism, more concerned with getting often dangerously involved in the action rather than reporting from a professional distance. And he was a larger-than-life character who just lived an insane life of substance abuse and guns and hard-hitting political journalism. Like he was a...
So like your life, Paul.
Oh, yeah. All my hard-hitting political journalism. But yeah, so he's an absolutely fascinating chap, and I'm going to talk about the adaptation of his most famous novel, probably, from 1971, and that is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And they finally made a film of it in 1998. So it stars Johnny Depp as Raoul Duke, which is essentially Hunter Thompson's alter ego / pseudonym, and Benicio del Toro in full mumbling Benicio mode. Like he's really good at mumbling stuff, isn't he, Benicio del Toro? I love that about him. And he plays his attorney, Dr. Gonzo, and they head to Las Vegas ostensibly to cover the Mint 400 motorcycle race and wind up going on a drug-induced odyssey across the city, and it's all very entertaining and bonkers indeed. So this is a film that took a long time to get off the ground, and attempts were made as far back as 1976 to make it, and at one point both Martin Scorsese and Oliver Stone each tried to get the film off the ground but were unsuccessful. So again, thinking about the alternate timelines of all these films that could have been made. And also, in the early development, it could have been Jack Nicholson and Marlon Brando in the title roles. And then later on, there were plans for it to be Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, but that fell apart when Belushi inconsiderately died. I know. just rude, isn't it? And then John Cusack nearly starred in it, but yeah. Because John Cusack directed the play version of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas at one point, so that was the connection there.
Directed.
But yeah, it wouldn't have been the same with Cusack. But yeah, when Hunter S. Thompson met Johnny Depp, he became convinced that no one else can play him. So originally, it was going to be Bruce Robinson Johnny Depp wanted to direct Fear and Loathing. So
I don't know who that is.
he directed With Nail and I. And then very little else of note. So he did How to Get Ahead in Advertising.
Absolute classic.
Yeah.
I highly recommend.
Well, there you go. So you do know Bruce Robinson. Yeah. And then he also went on to direct one of the only other adaptations of Hunter S. Thompson's work, The Rum Diary, also with Johnny Depp in 2011. But unfortunately, that wasn't quite so great. So yeah, and then at a certain point, Alex Cox, director of cult classic Repo Man, one of mine and my father's favourite films, was attached at one point. But I think it is a blessing that we wound up with Terry Gilliam, of course, the surrealist animator for Monty Python and director of films such as Brazil and 12 Monkeys. And I think that pairing of Gilliam, Depp, and that book is just the perfect combination. So it's kind of, I'm kind of glad that it took about 20 years to get it all together, because they're all just a perfect fit for each other.
At the top of their game.
At the top of their game, yeah, exactly. Like 90s Johnny Depp. So I think what works so well about it is it's one of the best and closest adaptations of a book, because how often do the people making a film actually get to hang around with the protagonist of a fictional novel? Because basically, the character Raoul Duke in Fear and Loathing, it is Hunter S. Thompson, and Thompson was alive and kicking at the time of making the film and able to give an insight into the film that few adaptations have the benefit of. But yeah, Johnny is like the perfect choice, and he moved in to Thompson's basement at his famous Owl Farm ranch, where Thompson spent his days writing, indulging in various substances and shooting guns. And yeah, Johnny Depp came and lived with him for 4 months, and they became best friends.
I bet they had a great time.
Yeah, can you imagine? Well, yes, you see, they lived together so long that some might argue that Johnny Depp never dropped character in real life. I think it was the comedian Doug Stanhope or something. Is just like, yeah, there just became a point where just Johnny Depp just became Hunter S. Thompson.
He was a choir boy when he entered that house.
Exactly, and then Hunter corrupted him. And in fact, apparently Bill Murray, who played Hunter S. Thompson in the not-so-great Where the Buffalo Roam, he warned Depp about playing Hunter S. Thompson. He was like, you need to play someone very different next, or you'll be stuck in that character forever. And then the next year, he went on to do The Ninth Gate, the Roman Polanski classic, and Sleepy Hollow. So very different characters, but Depp himself as a person, I would say, just very much stayed in very much stayed in Hunter S. Thompson mode. Can you imagine being a fly on the wall for those times at Owl Ranch?
Hear a lot of ammunition being fired.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they became really close, and Depp just studied him, and he just nails his voice, his mannerisms, everything. It's just one of the most faithful performances you'll ever see. And even Hunter S. Thompson shaved Johnny Depp's head for him to give him that male pattern baldness thing. So this is 90s heartthrob Johnny Depp. That's a bold move to come out with that haircut. But yeah, that's what happened. Meanwhile, Del Toro got into character by eating 16 donuts a day to gain 45 pounds.
I mean, that's the kind of method acting that I could get into.
That is the best method acting, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't want to do those ones where, the machinist or whatever it is.
Yeah, you got to lose weight.
No,
thanks.
You mean I can eat all the donuts? It's amazing. Oh, yeah. And even though that's like the easiest thing to fake is putting on weight.
Yeah, no, I'd insist. You got to really feel.
Yeah.
You got to feel that weight on your body.
You got to be method, man. But anyway, I just think it's a wonderful marriage of director and star and source material, and it just does a really good job. Yeah, it's just a great film, and it's really funny, but it does make serious political points about the death of the American dream and the decline of society in general. And, it looks great. It has a great soundtrack and holds up as a cult classic, I'd say, despite not doing particularly well at the time critically or commercially. But yeah, you should check it out For sure. Well, I think that's probably all we've got time for in our first Brum Picture Show book club. So please do send in your suggestions to pictureshow@brumradio.com with literary adaptations that you like or don't like. You are listening to the Brum Picture Show on Brum Radio, and we have been discussing literary adaptations. But now it is time for the review section. So first of all, Nadine has watched something recently that she says ties in with the theme of the episode. So I suppose it is appropriate that we start with that.
Yeah, so I have Mubi, and I've been trying to watch more films on there. And so I decided to watch the film Adaptation.
Oh, that is appropriate,
Yes.
isn't it?
Written by Charlie Kaufman and directed by Spike Jonze. Based on The Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean. So it is based on a book I haven't read. And it's a really weird meta film which encompasses filming of being John Malkovich. They kind of incorporate that into this film. The film is about Charlie Kaufman, but is played by Nicolas Cage, who also plays Charlie Kaufman's twin brother, who I don't believe exists.
Yes.
Charlie Kaufman was hired to write the script but struggled with writer's block. So, of course, instead of just adapting the book, wrote about that instead in a kind of, 8.5 is a film about a filmmaker who can't make a film. To be honest, I didn't love it visually. Cinematography and that, it was just a bit bland for me. I like things that are very stylized, and this was a bit more naturalistic.
Which is unusual for Spike Jonze.
And which is odd. And I didn't feel that Nicolas Cage really captured Charlie Kaufman's essence. It's very hard to watch it and not think that's Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's been a long time since I've seen Adaptation, so I can't really chip in that much. But what I do remember is that he looks an awful lot like Paul Giamatti. I feel like nowadays Paul Giamatti would be in that role.
And I think
maybe.
he does write himself as kind of a bit of a creep as well. I mean, he might be very relatable to some people, but I just, some of his interactions with women are a bit creepy. Meryl Streep is in it, of course. She's just a fantastic actress. But I didn't love it. But the bit that I especially loved that I want to talk about is something that I think the film as a whole, if you're a writer or a screenwriter, there'll be things that are very relatable. But there's a marvellous scene with Brian Cox, who plays screenwriting guru Robert McKee. And it's a scene they actually showed us in screenwriting class at film school. And it's kind of worth it just for this. So Robert McKee, if you don't know, he's a very well-respected author. He's written the book Story, Dialogue, some other books as well, I'm sure. And he's really famous for doing these massive seminars that are hugely expensive, but people come out and like, oh my God, I'm going to write a hit film. He's criticised because I think he's only written one screenplay that maybe didn't even get made into a film, or the film wasn't very good.
I think he wrote one screenplay that was made, and about 7 or 8 that were
just optioned.
And I think it was mainly a lot of TV stuff.
Yeah, so some people are like, who is this guy to sort of tell us how to write screenplays? But I have to say, I've read Story, I've read Dialogue. I think they are really good books. They're very weighty tomes. They're maybe not something you'd read in a couple of sittings. You might want to sort of dip in and out. But definitely very helpful, I find, to my writing. But Brian Cox plays a version of Robert McKee, and Nicolas Cage plays Charlie Kaufman, and he goes to one of these seminars and he says, I want to write a film that has no plot and nobody changes and there's no drama and no conflict and nobody grows, like real life. And Brian Cox is like life? You think nothing happens in life? And he just gives this sort of, there are people dying in the street and stuff. He just gives this amazing tour de force performance about, what real life is like and how dramatic it is and how pointless Charlie Kaufman's endeavour would be to write a film, which basically this film kind of mirrors. It's very weird. It starts off very sort of plotless and meandering, but then gets more and more dramatic towards the end. It gets very dramatic towards the end, which you feel it's very meta. You can imagine studio executives saying, nothing's happening in this, and sort of shoehorning in.
What I love about that scene though, as well, is because Charlie Kaufman in real life has been a critic of Robert McKee, but he actually gives his argument in the most sort of passionate and he really gives that argument kudos and credit, which is to his credit as the writer, I think.
No, I really, he fires you up, Brian Cox McKee. So I think I'm on.
He doesn't completely straw
side.
man him though, does he?
Yeah.
Build him up to fail. It's a really sort of
no, and then he does go for a drink with him afterwards or something. Like he asks him for advice and that. But that was my favourite part of the film anyway. The rest, I am on Robert McKee's side. I think it was too meandering and plotless and pointless until it got really exciting towards the end, just to kind of I don't know. Prove a point, I suppose. But yeah, it wasn't. I didn't love it, but I just thought it was a really interesting take on a book adaptation. I learned a lot about orchids watching it. There's a lot I didn't know about orchids. Great stellar cast. If you like Charlie Kaufman, if you like Spike Jonze, you might get something out of it. It's very quirky. But yeah, I think that was my favourite bit, I have to say.
Brian Cox shouting.
Yes, of course. Who doesn't love a bit of Brian Cox?
Isn't the universe wonderful?
Not that one. Now that I would pay to see.
There you go. Thanks for that, Nadine. I must revisit that one.
Another book adaptation that's out at the moment is Dune 2.
Yeah, which has been out for a while, but it is still going strong and really
strong.
Raking in the money. So it looks like Dune Messiah is definitely going to happen. So yeah. And I believe, Rory, you've now caught up with it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, really enjoyed the first one.
Yeah,
the second one I've got some issues with. I enjoyed it generally, but there was a few things.
They're very different. I think the first one, people complain that not very much happens in it in terms of plot. It was just, I don't think Robert McKee would have been impressed. It was a lot of vibes. The second one, but I did kind of prefer the first one as well. I think there was a lot of characters, there was a lot of new stuff jammed into the second one, maybe too much for me. But I do think I think Denis Villeneuve really wanted to keep to the spirit of the book. And I think Frank Herbert was disappointed that people saw Paul Atreides as a hero, as he didn't really intend for him to be seen that way. And he tried to correct that later. So I think this is Denis Villeneuve trying to bake that in a bit sooner.
That's what I think is really interesting about it, because I've not read the books, but like in the David Lynch version, it's not really portrayed as that bad a thing, that he's basically a god by the end, like he's making it rain and everything, but it's kind of like, look at this, he's now a god. But yeah, really, it's just a weedy little man who becomes Space Hitler. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that was the kind of the spin. So like watching that, I was like, oh, this is a really interesting story, isn't it? And I kind of feel it's just starting to get interesting, the story of where it gets to. Because
I definitely want to see where the next one goes.
I do have a criticism of it though. And another film that suffers from this is, do you know Blonde?
I love that film.
Yeah.
The Marilyn Monroe film.
And is the talking fetus.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm not a fan.
You're not a fan of talking fetuses?
Not a fan of the talking fetus, mate.
It's a shame. I love a good talking fetus.
No, Dune 2, Blonde.
Yeah.
If the listeners can name a third talking fetus, that'd be great.
There's a dancing baby in Ally
McBeal. Yeah.
There's the fetus.
There's the fetus in 2001, but it doesn't talk.
Okay, that's fine, but I don't like talking fetuses.
Listeners, do email in with your memories of talking fetuses.
From
films specifically, not your own nightmares, please.
But yeah, I think it's worth seeing. But I kind of like the first one better, and I don't know why. But I just, it was just more of a vibe. I think, I was definitely a lot more up in it, because I went to see it the second time, and it was the second time I was like, oh yeah, okay, I'm really, really on board with it. Because I do think it is, I am so glad to see that kind of money being spent on just a brilliant sci-fi epic.
It looks amazing.
Yeah, it is incredible. And then like seeing it with a proper sound system, and there's the way that the bass just vibrates through your chair, and it's just like remarkable. And it's, you know, a Hans Zimmer score that isn't too Hans Zimmery for me. Like, I really enjoyed that, and it's and I think it's such a brave thing to have a film that follows this protagonist that then you realise by the end it's just like, oh, maybe we shouldn't be liking this guy. And I think that's really cool for such a mainstream big thing. And it's
still no Patrick Stewart running into battle with a pug.
It really did lack that, because that is the best bit of David Lynch's version.
Of course,
Patrick Stewart running into battle with a pug, and then you've got
no explanation
whatsoever, and then you've got that little cat that's going around in that harness. Remember, isn't Sting going around with it?
Sting has a very interesting outfit.
Yeah. Sting has a very interesting
a lot
outfit.
of domesticated animals.
Well, the Lynch version is all about the domesticated animals. So I think because in his they were supposed to represent like the excesses of society and the weird breeding of those kind of classes, I think. So that's
like Poor Things with the weird animals.
Exactly. There you go. But I really still have a soft spot for the Lynch version, because even though he has disowned it himself, and it is an absolute mess of a film that even by providing more exposition it becomes more confusing, but it's still like, it's just such a wonderful little oddity, and I'm still very grateful.
I mean, there is a lot of, that's the one
exists.
thing, I think, you know, Villeneuve, I think he's a great director in many ways, but I find his sci-fi worlds are very minimalist and empty, and they don't feel lived in and interesting, and I think Lynch's version of that world is so imaginative and bizarre that it's, for me, just a bit more interesting visually.
Yeah, but so in a way, like, his approach to it was kind of a reaction to that, and just you know. But obviously, I think Denis' version is objectively better, as Rory would say. But yeah, Lynch, it's David Lynch, man. You gotta go back to him, haven't you?
Any other film reviews?
I did want to talk about Late Night with the Devil a little bit, which we saw. So this is written and directed by Cameron and Colin Cairns and starring David Dastmalchian. So this is about Jack Delroy, a late-night talk show host who, desperate for ratings, decides to invite a supposedly possessed girl onto the show. And also invited onto the show are a clairvoyant and, for good measure, a skeptic who is willing to pay a large sum of money to anyone who can provide proof of the supernatural. And for a film called Late Night with the Devil, things go pretty much as expected. So this obviously owes a great debt to Ghostwatch, which in 1992 caused a War of the Worlds-style uproar as it purported to show genuinely supernatural activity from a ghost called Mr. Pipes.
I watched it live.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It was really naff.
Oh, so you weren't one of the people calling in shocked.
Fake. It was obviously fake.
Well, that's the thing. Apparently, the BBC received, reports vary, of 20,000 to 1 million calls that night.
Well, the problem was because they presented it as real.
Well, yes, but yeah, some were claiming it had shocked them, and others that it had insulted their intelligence.
Well, I think I would have been one of those. I was about 9 when it came.
Oh, wow. So even 9-year-old Nadine didn't think it was real.
Although I did freak my sister out because I had some face paint on and she didn't realise, and she thought I had scratches appear on my face. It was just cat face paint.
Well, that's interesting that you were there at the time. But yeah, so that, of course, kind of influenced what this film reminded me most of, which was a recent episode of Inside Number 9, which purported to be a new game show with Lee Mack. And then it devolves into Satanic Business. And it was announced on TV as such, and will possibly be one of the last opportunities to genuinely fool an audience. And I think that leads me to the main problem with this film, is it would work a lot better if you didn't know where the film was going. But obviously, if you do go to see this film, you know what it's about. That's the thing. This is what I mean about the best viewing experience, is going into a film completely cold. Like, so if you didn't know that this is going to turn into a proper horror film, then it might be a lot more scary. But obviously they couldn't just air this like randomly on network TV, so it is what it is. And I guess a part of the problem is that the whole found footage thing is a little bit tired, and it doesn't really work these days, because like when the Blair Witch Project came out, there was a small portion of the audience, admittedly possibly a quite stupid small portion of the audience, who thought that what they were watching was real, that was genuinely real. But no one going to see Late Night with the Devil thinks this is real.
Wow.
And then, you know, well...
There are some people.
So I mean, it's obviously not that scary and effective because of that. But nevertheless, I was thoroughly entertained throughout. And I enjoyed the film very much, so I don't know what I'm moaning about, really. Like, I really like the practical effects, and it had a bonkers finale, which some people I've heard complain about, saying that it all falls apart at the end. But
I think the end is the best bit.
Yeah, it's like, how else?
I think it could have been more bonkers.
Yeah, it's like, but how else are you going to end that film? So, yeah, so there you go. But all in all, I thought it was good fun, just not great. So, yeah, Nadine, what did you think?
Yeah, I've watched a lot of horror films and I'm a bit hard to please because it just wasn't scary enough for me, I gotta say.
Yeah.
A bit too much of the cheesy, corny, late night jokes that... I mean, my complaint, it's the same thing that I had with WandaVision. I think most of modern actors are great at being like naturalistic and sort of, you know, real. But you put them in that kind of situation of like, you know, a 50s sitcom or a 70s show, and you need a certain kind of charisma and performance. It's like, you know, stand-up. Watching actors play stand-up comedians is usually not funny because it's not there isn't that live feedback from the audience. And I get that, yes, these shows had laugh tracks and stuff, but there's still that performative, larger-than-life kind of element that you need, and it just... There's something about people intentionally writing naff jokes that just doesn't work for me. And I actually like the cutaway bits better, the bits where they weren't on air, because they felt more real and natural and sort of... But the stuff that was supposed to be on air, it's a bit like Garth Marenghi in that way of like a lass, but that was very silly. So I think that got away with it because it was so silly. It was so spot on with like the bad editing and stuff like that. But the storylines were just so ridiculous that it worked well as a satire. Yeah. Whereas I think this doesn't quite do it for me, but I admire the scope of it and the idea of it. And I think the end was really good. But it just wasn't scary enough for me.
Well, what is scary nowadays?
The news.
Well, there we go. I did want to quickly, very, very quickly mention, because I was bemoaning remakes and the lack of originality in Hollywood these days earlier. I did want to give a shout out to the remake of Roadhouse, which I must say I thoroughly enjoyed. So, yeah, anyone watch that? Anyone seen the original?
No.
Oh, that's a shame. Okay.
But it's worth watching.
It's worth watching. It's worth watching. Because, Steven Soderbergh has always said he draws a distinction between a movie and a film. And this was one of the moviest movies that I've ever seen. It's about a really tough, butt-kicking bouncer who's hired to sort out the ruffians in one of the roughest bars in town. And in the 1989 original, it's Patrick Swayze, and in the new one, it's Jake Gyllenhaal. And it's just, they're both like ridiculous. And I was impressed by how this kind of managed to replicate the tone of the first one, because it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it's, you know, it doesn't get too goofy either, and it's just ridiculous, silly, and violent fun, just like the original. So you could argue it's a completely unnecessary remake. It doesn't really make any major changes to the tone or story of the original, but it seems as young people refuse to watch a film from the last century these days, this might be a good way to introduce them to an old classic while standing up as a great film in its own right. So yeah, thoroughly recommend Roadhouse. So yeah, that is about all we've got time for on the review section today, but we've just got time for Nadine's roundup of local news and events.
On the 13th of April, Highbury Cinema Club will be showing The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry at the Highbury Theatre Centre in Sutton Coldfield. On the 16th of April, Journey Film Club are showing Suicide Squad at the LGBT Centre. On the 18th of April, we're going to be showing Poor Things at the Cuban Embassy, and if I can get to Lidl beforehand, we'll have some pastel de natas there. Woo! So you can enjoy a sensory experience while watching the film. On the 26th of April, Sturchley Open Cinema will be showing Rory's favourite film, Parasite, at Sturchley Baths. And tickets are available now for the Flat Pack Film Festival. Various locations, various films will be being shown from the 10th to the 19th of May. And as part of the Flat Pack Film Festival, Whatever Pays the Rent will be showing Mean Girls at the Mockingbird on the 15th of May. So search for these events online and get your tickets now.
Very good. Well, lovely. Thank you very much, Nadine. Sounds like there's some very exciting stuff coming up. Indeed. So there you go. Another very waffly episode of the Brum Picture Show. Thank you very much for joining us again. Thank you, Nadine and Rory, for joining me again. It's been so nice to have the whole team together. Do be sure to join us next time. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from me, Paul.
Goodbye from me, Nadine.
And it's goodbye from me, Rory.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Woo.
You have been listening to The Brum Picture Show, a Screen B14 production for Brum Radio. Tune in next time for more film fun, and don't forget to email us at pictureshow@brumradio.com. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
You're such an intellectual, Rory.
I know. Oh.
Despite what this radio show presents me as.
I know we like to sort of bully Rory as if we're intellectually superior. We're like, what novels have you read? It's like, I've read a self-help book I got free with a magazine in 2009.
Yeah, and Rory comes out with Crime and Punishment.
I love Crime and Punishment. Raskolnikov.
You're so wise. Bless you, Rory.
Thank you for listening to this Brum Radio podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us on your podcast app.